I'm Henry. I'm 34 years old, and my own parents tried to sue me to steal my house for my brother. Before I tell you about the moment in a quiet law office that completely destroyed their lives, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. I'd love to see how far this story travels. It all started with a phone call on a Tuesday. I remember the sky was a flat, boring gray, the kind that makes you want to stay inside and question your life choices. I was in my workshop, the place I felt most myself, carefully sanding a piece of reclaimed oak that was destined to become a tabletop. The scent of sawdust, a perfume of progress and creation, filled the air. It was my happy place, my sanctuary. My phone buzzed, the vibration rattling against a stack of sandpaper on the workbench. The screen lit up, Dad. My stomach immediately tightened into a cold, familiar knot. He never called just to chat. A call from my father was a summons, a harbinger of some new demand or disappointment. "Henry," he said, his voice a low growl that skipped any form of greeting. It was the voice he used when he was about to issue an order. "Your mother and I have been talking. We've been more than patient. It's time you did the right thing. We're giving you one last chance to sign the house over to Leo." I set the sanding block down, the fine dust settling on my hands. The low hum of the dust collector in the corner suddenly felt like a roar in the dead silence. "What are you talking about, Dad?" I asked, my own voice coming out low and strained. "We've been over this a dozen times. This is my house. I am not giving my house to anyone. Don't be so dramatic. It's not just a house, it's a family asset," he snapped, his impatience turning into audible anger. "Your brother needs it. Leo is getting married, he's trying to start a family. He needs stability. You're single, rattling around in that big place all by yourself. The selfish is what it is. Pure selfishness. I found this house when it was a ruin," I said, each word a carefully controlled release of the fury building inside me. "I bought it with my own money, from a job you called a hobby. I rebuilt it with my own hands. My name is on the deed, the mortgage, every single permit." End of discussion. There was a heavy pause on the line. I could almost hear him grinding his teeth. Then he dropped the bomb. "It doesn't have to be the end of the discussion. We've spoken to a lawyer, a very good one. If you don't sign the transfer papers by Friday, we're taking you to court. We will sue you for it." For a second, the world tilted. Sue me? Their own son? For something that was legally, morally, and in every fiber of my being, mine? The sheer absurdity of it, the monstrous, galactic-level entitlement, was so shocking I couldn't form a coherent thought. I felt a hysterical laugh bubble up, but it died in my throat, turning into a strangled gasp. My mind, however, kicked into gear. I was scheduled to meet with my new lawyer, Julia Morse, the very next day to discuss the escalating harassment. "You know what, Dad?" I said, a strange, cold calm washing over me as an idea took shape. "Hold on a second. There's someone here who would be very interested to hear this." I put the phone on speaker and set it on the desk. "Dad, you're on speakerphone with my legal counsel, Julia Morse. Could you please do me the favor of repeating what you just said?" A brief hesitation, then my father's voice, now laced with an extra layer of attempted authority for this new audience. "I said," he enunciated clearly, "that if he does not willingly transfer the property to his brother, we have retained counsel and will sue him for full possession of the asset." Across the desk from me, Julia, a woman who radiated a calm, lethal competence, looked at me. A slow, incredulous smile spread across her face. And then she laughed. It wasn't a polite chuckle. It was a full, unrestrained, throaty laugh, rich with genuine amusement. It was the sound of a lioness watching a mouse try to roar. It echoed from the speakerphone, a sound of pure, unadulterated disbelief. My father was stunned into a sputtering silence. "On what grounds, exactly, Mr. Miller?" Julia said, her voice still laced with laughter. "Do you possibly plan to sue your own son for a property he legally purchased and owns? I'm dying to hear the legal theory behind this one." My mother, Gloria, who must have been listening in, suddenly jumped on the line, her voice shrill. "He knows what he owes us. We raised him. We gave him a roof over his head. Julia's laughter ceased instantly. Her voice dropped 10 degrees, turning to solid ice. Raising a child is a legal and moral duty, Mrs. Miller, not a predatory loan you get to call in whenever you feel like it. Now, if you'll excuse us, my client and I have an actual legal strategy to discuss, not a work of fiction. You will be hearing from my office. Goodbye. She ended the call before they could utter another syllable. She looked at me, her eyes sparkling with a fierce light. Well, she said, leaning back in her chair. That was illuminating. In that moment, hearing her powerful, dismissive laugh obliterate their pathetic threats, something inside me broke free. The fear, the guilt, the lifetime of feeling small and obligated. It all began to dissolve. For the very first time in my life, I felt a surge of real power. I wasn't just a son. I was a client. I was a man who had rights. Julia leaned forward, her expression all business. Now, Henry, let them try, and tell me everything. Start with that house. Before it was a $500,000 asset my family was willing to tear itself apart for, it was a ghost. A beautiful, forgotten, 1920s craftsman bungalow that was slowly surrendering to the forces of nature. I found it by accident, on a street lined with ancient oak trees, their branches forming a canopy overhead. The for sale sign was faded and tilted. It was listed for $140,000, a price that screamed, land value only, and for good reason. The roof had a visible sag in the middle like a tired old horse. The porch was collapsing in on itself, and the windows were a sad collection of broken panes and weathered plywood. To my parents, it was a liability. To my brother, Leo, it was a punchline. I remember the day I brought them to see it after my offer had been accepted, my heart pounding with a nervous excitement. I saw the potential, the good bones beneath the decay. I saw the original hardwood floors peeking out from under layers of cracked linoleum, the handcrafted built-in cabinets gasping for air under coats of thick, lead-based paint. I saw what it could be, a piece of history I could save. My father kicked at a loose porch step, which crumbled into dust. This is a money pit, Henry. A complete teardown. What in God's name are you thinking? This is where your savings are going. My mother, Gloria, just shook her head, her face a mask of profound disappointment. Oh, honey, you're going to be all alone in this shack. You should be saving for a proper condominium, something secure. Not this project. The way she said project made it sound like a terminal illness. Leo just laughed, a short, sharp bark. Seriously, bro? Good luck with that. Text me when you find a family of raccoons living in the attic. I'll bring a camera. Their words were like stones, but instead of burying me, they became the foundation I built upon. For the next 5 years, that house became my entire world. I wasn't just the owner. I was the apprentice and the master, the student and the teacher. My day job as a custom furniture maker gave me the skills with wood, but the house taught me everything else. Taught me plumbing, wiring, masonry, and most of all, it taught me resilience. My life became a routine of work, house, sleep. Weekends were a blur of demolition and construction. I spent one entire sweltering July in a Tyvek suit and respirator, carefully abating asbestos from the old heating ducts. I spent evenings on my hands and knees, painstakingly stripping decades of paint from the original fireplace mantel, revealing the intricate carvings beneath. I taught myself how to pour new concrete footings for the porch, watching online tutorials until my eyes burned. I read old, leather-bound carpentry books I found at flea markets. My hands were a permanent roadmap of calluses, cuts, and splinters, and my clothes always carried the scent of sawdust and paint thinner. There were days I almost gave up. I remember one brutal night in January, the temperature well below freezing, when a corroded pipe in the attic burst. I woke up to the sound of water raining down through my half-finished kitchen ceiling. Standing there in the dark, soaked and shivering, watching my hard work get ruined, I heard their voices in my head. Money pit. Shack. We told you so. I sat down in the puddle on the floor and almost cried. But then, the breakthroughs would come. The magical moment I pulled up the final piece of hideous 1970s shag carpet to reveal pristine, quarter-sawn oak floors, their grain glowing in the afternoon light. The day I installed the last of the restored original sash windows, unboarding the house to the world and letting the sun stream in for the first time in what felt like a century. The quiet evening I finally finished the front porch, sat on the steps I had built myself, and watched the sunset with a cold beer, feeling a sense of deep, bone-weary pride that was more satisfying than anything I had ever known. I didn't just restore a house. I resurrected it. I poured my soul into its very frame. Every miter joint was perfect. Every finish was flawless. It wasn't just a structure. It was a physical manifestation of my sweat, my vision, and my stubborn refusal to fail. It was the one place on earth that was entirely, completely mine, free from the crushing weight of my family's judgment and expectations. It was my sanctuary, and as the property value climbed, reflecting the 5 years of my life I had poured into it, it also became something else I never intended. It became a target. To understand why my parents could look at my life's work and see it as a resource to be plundered for my brother, you have to understand the landscape of my family. It was a kingdom with two princes. Leo, the crown prince, the golden child. And me, the ghost prince, the one who haunted the hallways, useful but rarely seen. It had been this way since the beginning. Leo was the sun. He was charming, effortlessly social, and had a magnetic personality that drew people in. He was the one who got the easy smiles, the proud pats on the back, the endless stream of second chances that flowed like a river. I was the quiet moon, visible only when the sun wasn't around. I was introverted, studious, and always felt like my existence was conditional, that I had to constantly earn my place at the family table through achievement and self-sufficiency. Our childhood was a long, slow education in this dynamic, taught through 1,000 tiny cuts. I remember when I was 15, I'd become obsessed with astronomy. I'd saved up for months from my part-time job bagging groceries to buy a decent telescope. I had $150, and the telescope I wanted was $300. I showed my parents the catalog, my heart pounding with hope. My father glanced at it. "That's a lot of money for a toy, Henry. Are you sure you'll stick with it?" They gave me $50 for my birthday and told me to keep saving. 2 months later, Leo, who was 17, decided on a whim that he wanted to be a DJ. My dad went out that weekend and bought him a brand new, top-of-the-line turntable setup that cost over $1,000. Leo used it for 6 weeks before it started gathering dust in his closet. When I pointed this out, my mother gave me her signature tired look. "Your brother is creative, Henry. We have to support his passions. It's different." It was always different. The most glaring example was college. I knew money was tight, so I worked relentlessly in high school to get a partial academic scholarship to a good state school. I worked 20 hours a week all through college, bussing tables and later doing freelance carpentry work. I graduated with honors and a manageable amount of student loan debt. I was proud of that. My parents' contribution was to occasionally tell their friends that I was very independent. But when Leo, who had barely scraped through high school, decided he wanted the experience of a private out-of-state university with a tuition that was 4 times my own, my parents didn't hesitate. They took out a second mortgage on their house. It was a massive financial strain, but they framed it as a heroic sacrifice. They threw him a huge going-away-to-college party. My father gave a teary-eyed speech about giving his son the chance he never had. The prestige of that university decal on the back of their car was, to them, worth any price. As I mentioned, Leo dropped out after 3 semesters, complaining that the professors were boring. There were no lectures about responsibility then, just sympathetic sighs and a safety net to catch him. They never, ever called it favoritism. They had a phrase for it: meeting their needs. I heard it 1,000 times. "Leo just needs more support, Henry. He's more sensitive to the pressures of the world. You're strong. You can handle things on your own." My strength was not a quality to be celebrated. It was an excuse to neglect me. My independence wasn't a source of pride for them. It was a convenience. My role in the family was to be the responsible one, the low-maintenance one, the one who never asked for anything so that all the family's resources, emotional, financial, and otherwise, could be directed toward Leo. And for a long, long time I played that part. I thought that by being quiet, by working hard, by never causing a single ripple in the family pond, I would eventually earn their respect, their love. But all it earned me was invisibility. My achievements were met with a distracted nod, my struggles with a dismissive wave. So when Leo announced he was getting married to his sweet, long-suffering girlfriend, Grace, and my parents declared that he needed a proper home to start his life with dignity, their eyes, as if guided by a magnetic force, landed on my beautiful, restored, and now very valuable house. In their twisted family calculus, the equation was simple. Leo needed it. The ghost, did not. After all, ghosts don't need homes. They're just supposed to haunt them quietly. The only person who ever seemed to see me clearly was my grandmother, Martha. She was my dad's mom, a woman as sharp as a freshly honed chisel, and as warm as the wood stove she kept burning all winter. She smelled of cinnamon and old books and spoke in truths, which often made the rest of my family uncomfortable. She saw my quiet nature not as a deficit, but as a strength. She noticed my fascination with how things were made, and for my 13th birthday, she gave me my first real set of Japanese wood chisels, their steel handles wrapped in red oak. It's a gift I still have and use to this day. While my parents were at Leo's football games, cheering for a son who was mostly warming the bench, Grandma Martha would be in the garage with me. She taught me how to read the grain of a piece of wood, how to make a perfect dovetail joint, how to respect the tool and the material. "You have good hands, Henry," she'd say, her own weathered hands guiding mine. "Smart hands. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small because you speak more with your work than with your words. A well-made chair will outlast 1,000 empty promises." When she passed away 5 years ago, it felt like the last true light in my world had been extinguished. Her funeral was a somber affair. I remember standing by her gravesite, the cold wind whipping around me, feeling an acute and profound loneliness. She was my ally, and now she was gone. A week later, my parents sat me and Leo down in their living room. The air was heavy with a kind of performative solemnity. My father held a document in his hand, his knuckles white. "We've met with your grandmother's lawyer and reviewed her will," he announced, his eyes fixed on a point on the wall just over my shoulder. He couldn't look at me. She made some last-minute changes before she passed. My mother reached over and patted my hand, a cold, dry gesture that felt entirely rehearsed. "She loved you both so much, Henry. You know that." But she was very worried about Leo, his future, his lack of direction. She wanted to make sure he was taken care of. I braced myself. I knew what was coming. "She decided to leave her entire estate to him," my father said, the words coming out in a rush, "to give him the fresh start he needs." I just stared at them, the world narrowing to a tight, roaring tunnel. My grandmother had always been a fierce advocate for fairness. She had told me a dozen times, sitting at her kitchen table, that she was dividing everything right down the middle. She had set up a trust fund for each of us. She'd explained, with the money from the sale of her farmland years ago. It was supposed to be our safety net, our head start. A significant amount. A life-changing amount. Everything. I finally managed to ask, my voice a hoarse whisper. "She left me nothing at all?" "That's not true, honey," my mom said quickly, a little too brightly. "She was very specific. She left you her collection of old tools from the garage. She knew how much you'd appreciate the history of them." The insult was so sharp, so precise, it took my breath away. My grandmother knew I already had professional-grade tools. Her old, rusted handsaws and worn-out screwdrivers were pure sentiment, not a legacy. Leo, to his credit, had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Hey man, I'm sorry," he mumbled, shifting his weight. I was surprised too, but, I'll take care of you, if you ever need anything. The offer was as hollow as the look in my parents' eyes. In my grief and confusion, I felt a deep, wrenching sense of betrayal, but it was all directed at the one person who wasn't there to defend herself. How could she? The one person I thought understood me had, in her final act, declared that I wasn't worthy. I accepted it. I took the dusty cardboard box of old tools and I walked away. I didn't demand to see the will. I didn't question their story. I trusted my parents. It was a catastrophic mistake, a blind spot born of a desperate, childish hope that they were, at their core, good people. That supposed betrayal from my grandmother was the final cut that severed my reliance on my family. It was the catalyst that drove me to pour every ounce of myself into my work, into my house. I was determined to build a life so solid, so self-sufficient, that I would never need anyone's inheritance or approval ever again. I didn't know it then, but the foundation of that new life, the one I was so proud of, was built upon a cruel, calculated, and devastating lie. A lie that was about to shatter. The first crack in their 5-year-old lie appeared, as so many inconvenient truths do, at a holiday dinner table. It was Thanksgiving, a command performance gathering at my parents' house. I had tried to beg off, claiming I had too much work, but my mother had deployed a weaponized form of guilt that was impossible to defend against. So there I was, nursing a glass of water, trying to be as inanimate as the centerpiece. Leo, as always, was the star of the show. He and his fiancée, Grace, sat in the center of the table, a king and his reluctant queen. Leo was several glasses of my father's most expensive red wine into the evening, and his voice was booming, his gestures grand and theatrical. He was regaling the captive audience with tales of a recent, extravagant trip to Europe. And the hotels? Oh my God! The hotels? He slurred, just slightly, waving his wine glass precariously. We stayed at this place in Paris, right on the Seine, cost $2,000 a night. But you only live once, am I right? My father beamed, puffing out his chest. That's my boy. Knows how to enjoy the finer things in life. I just gritted my teeth and focused on carving my turkey, the knife scraping against the plate. I knew for a fact that Leo had been exploring his options, my family's euphemism for unemployed, for the last 4 months. Grace worked as a teacher's assistant. Her modest salary wasn't funding a Parisian vacation that cost more than my first car. Then Leo let out a loud, braying laugh. Yeah, well, it's easy to live it up when you're flush. Thank God for Grandma's inheritance. That money was just burning a hole in my pocket. Had to be spent. Use it or lose it. The entire table went quiet for a beat. The clinking of silverware stopped. I slowly looked up from my plate. My eyes locked with my father's across the table, and I saw a flash of pure, undiluted panic in them before he quickly looked away, suddenly fascinated by his wine glass. My mother started bustling, jumping up to offer everyone more mashed potatoes with a frantic energy. But my attention wasn't on them. It was on Grace. She was staring down at her plate, her knuckles white where she was gripping her fork. She looked utterly mortified. A deep crimson blush was creeping up her neck. She wouldn't look at anyone. As Leo rambled on, I saw her give a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head, a silent plea for him to just shut up. A cold, heavy knot formed in the pit of my stomach. That money, not my inheritance. That money. The way he said it was so casual, so careless. It was the way someone talks about an expected windfall, not a surprising gift that came at the cost of their siblings' share. The conversation was clumsily steered in a new direction by my aunt, but I couldn't shake Leo's words. The pieces of the last 5 years started to click into place in my mind, forming a picture so ugly and sharp it made me feel sick. The lie about the will. Leo's sudden ability to live a life of leisure. My parents' increasing desperation to get my house for him now that the money, it seemed, was gone. I risked another glance at Grace. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. In that brief, unguarded moment, I saw an ocean of something I never expected. Apology. Shame. It was a look that screamed, "You're right. It's all true." She knew. She knew it was all a lie. That night, I went home to my beautiful, quiet house. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a sanctuary. It felt like a fortress under siege, and the enemy was already inside the gates. I knew then that this was no longer about a property dispute. It was about a theft. It was about a 5-year-old lie that had fundamentally altered the course of my life. And I was going to unearth the truth no matter how much it destroyed. 2 days after that disastrous Thanksgiving dinner, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was just a single audio file with no accompanying text. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. I had a sickening feeling I knew what this was. I walked into my quiet workshop, closed the door, put on my headphones, took a deep breath, and pressed play. The recording was a bit muffled, the quality suggesting a phone hidden in a pocket or a purse. But the voices were clear. It was a furious, whispered argument between Leo and Grace. "I cannot believe you said that at dinner, Leo." Grace's voice was tight and shaking with anger. "About the inheritance. In front of Henry. In front of everyone. Do you have any idea how that looked? Do you ever think?" What are you talking about? It's the truth." Leo's voice was defensive, laced with his signature whine. "It was my money. Grandma gave it to me." "Was it, Leo? Was it all yours? Or was half of that $200,000 supposed to be your brother's inheritance?" There it was. The number. $200,000. It hung in the air, a solid, tangible thing that represented 5 years of my life lived under a false pretense. "Oh, come on. Don't be so dramatic," Leo scoffed. "My parents handled the inheritance. They're the executors. They knew I needed it more. Henry had his little workshop, his little house project. He was fine. He's always fine. What was he going to do with it? Buy more old wood? I invested it. I put it to good use." "You call that trip to Europe an investment?" Grace's voice dripped with scorn. "You call that ridiculous sports car you bought and then crashed 2 months later an investment? You call pouring 60 grand into that sham of a crypto company your idiot friend started an investment? The money is gone, Leo. It's all gone. And now your parents are trying to steal his house to cover for your monumental failures." "Hey, they're doing what's best for the family," he shouted. "No, they are doing what's best for you," she shot back, her voice breaking. "They always have, and I am sick of it. I am sick of the lies. I'm sick of watching them treat your brother like dirt after they stole from him. It's wrong." The recording ended abruptly. I sat there on my stool, the headphones still pressed against my ears, the silence of the workshop roaring around me. I felt dizzy, nauseous. It wasn't just a lie. It was a cold, calculated conspiracy between the 3 people who were supposed to be my family. They had stolen a fortune from me. A fortune my grandmother, the one person who truly believed in me, had left to secure my future. The sense of betrayal was so immense, so total. It felt like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. My own family. I knew who sent the recording. Could only be Grace. The reluctant witness, the one person in that toxic ecosystem with a functioning conscience. She had just handed me a loaded gun. The next morning, the grief and confusion were gone, replaced by a cold, clear resolve. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a man who had been wronged, and I was going to get justice. I went to my bank and drained a significant portion of my business savings, a move that terrified me, but I knew it was necessary. I hired the best private investigator my money could buy. His name was Marco. He was a quiet, methodical ex-cop who radiated a calm competence that I desperately needed. I sat in his small, neat office and laid out the whole sordid story. I played him the recording. I gave him the details of my grandmother's death, the name of the town she lived in, her lawyer's name, everything I could possibly remember. "I want the truth," I told him, my voice hard and steady. "I want to find the real will. I want to know exactly what they did, down to the last dollar." Marco just nodded, his eyes missing nothing. "They always leave a paper trail," he said. "Give me a week." He only needed 5 days. He called me back to his office. A single, thick file folder sat on his desk between us. He opened it, and my old life officially ended, and a new one began. "Your grandmother, Martha Miller, created an irrevocable trust in 2010, he said, his voice a professional monotone that delivered devastating facts. "The beneficiaries were you, Henry Miller, and your brother, Leo Miller. Equal shares. Upon her death, The trust was valued at $402,000. $201,000 for each of you. Your parents, Richard and Gloria Miller, were the executors. He slid a notarized copy of the real will across the desk. My name was right there in black and white next to Leo's. They never filed this will with the probate court, Marco continued, his words like hammer blows. They submitted a fraudulent, much older version that named your father as the sole heir. Then, as executors of the trust, they liquidated the assets and deposited the entire amount into a joint bank account they shared with your brother. They stole your inheritance, Mr. Miller. It's as clean and simple as that. He paused, then pushed another set of papers toward me. Tax documents. And it gets worse. While you were living in your own home, working a full-time job and paying all your own bills, your parents continued to claim you as a dependent on their tax returns for 5 straight years after you turned 24. They claimed deductions for your tuition, even though your scholarship and your own income paid for it. They didn't just steal from you. They committed federal tax fraud using your name as a shield. I walked out of Marco's office and into the bright afternoon sunlight feeling like a stranger in my own skin. The man who had walked in there an hour ago was gone. That man was filled with a sad, lingering grief over his grandmother's perceived betrayal and a lifetime of quiet resentment. The man who walked out was forged in rage and armed with cold, hard facts. That's when I hired Julia Morse. I didn't look for a family lawyer. I looked for a shark. I found her. I walked into her sleek, downtown office with Marco's meticulously organized file. She read through everything, her sharp, intelligent eyes missing nothing. Her expression grew more severe with each page she turned. When she was finally done, she closed the file, placed her hands on top of it, and looked up at me. There was a fire in her eyes that mirrored my own. "They didn't just steal from you, Henry," she said, her voice a low, controlled fury. "They committed multiple serious felonies. This isn't a family squabble that can be mediated over coffee. This is a criminal case masquerading as a civil dispute. And that brings us back to the phone call. When my father, in his infinite arrogance, threatened to sue me, he had no idea that I was sitting on a mountain of evidence that could send him and my mother to prison for a very long time. His pathetic attempt at intimidation was a child's tantrum in the face of the legal firestorm Julia and I were about to unleash. After that call, Julia went on the offensive. Within hours, a formal, terrifying letter from her office was messengered to my parents. It informed them that their frivolous lawsuit over my house was being met with a devastating countersuit. The suit demanded the immediate repayment of my $201,000 inheritance, plus 10 years of compound interest, totaling well over $300,000. It also stated, in no uncertain terms, that we had irrefutable evidence of their inheritance theft and multi-year tax fraud, and that we were fully prepared to turn the entire file over to the Internal Revenue Service and the District Attorney's Office if they did not comply. The reaction was immediate and exactly what we expected. My phone began to blow up, but it wasn't from my parents. They had gone to ground. The calls were from my extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, people I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly crawling out of the woodwork, summoned by my parents to apply pressure. The family group chat, a digital space normally reserved for bland birthday wishes and blurry vacation photos, became a war zone. My Aunt Carol, my mother's sister and chief enabler, was the first to attack. "Henry, I just heard the most awful, shocking news. How could you do this to your own parents? Suing your mother and father? After everything they've done for you? It's shameful." My Uncle Joe, my dad's brother, quickly chimed in. "Your parents gave you everything. This is how you repay them. All over a house? Your brother needs that house. A family needs to stick together." My cousin Lucas, Leo's contemporary, added his 2 cents. "Dude, what is wrong with you? It's just money. Family is more important. You're tearing everyone apart." For 34 years, this kind of coordinated emotional assault would have worked. It would have made me crumble. I would have questioned myself, felt the familiar sting of guilt, and probably would have backed down for the sake of peace. But not anymore. They had mistaken my quiet nature for weakness for the very last time. With steady hands, I typed out a single, simple reply and posted it for the entire family to see. To all my concerned family members, I wrote, let me be perfectly clear. My parents did not give me everything. In fact, they stole a $201,000 inheritance that my grandmother specifically left for me. To add to that, they committed federal tax fraud for 5 years using my name. This isn't about a house. It's about multiple felony crimes. The evidence, bank statements, the real will, their fraudulent tax returns, has been filed with the court as part of my countersuit. It is all now a matter of public record. If you'd like to know the truth, feel free to look it up. Until then, I would appreciate it if you directed your outrage at the actual criminals in this situation. This will be my only statement on the matter. Absolute silence. The group chat went completely dead. The barrage of calls and texts stopped as if a switch had been flipped. I had fired my shot, not with emotion, but with facts. The war had officially begun. The week that followed was unnervingly quiet, the proverbial calm before the storm. My parents' lawsuit against me was still technically active, a dark cloud lingering on the horizon, but they themselves had gone completely silent. I imagined them huddled with their lawyer, who was likely explaining to them in painstaking detail just how much legal jeopardy they were truly in. Julia called this the shock and awe phase. Now, she explained, it was time to plan the final checkmate. They're cornered animals right now, Henry, she told me, her fingers steepled on the polished surface of her desk. And cornered animals are dangerous and irrational. They're too proud to admit they've lost, but they are terrified of the consequences. We can drag this through the courts for the next year, and we will absolutely win. But it will be expensive, it will be ugly, and it will be emotionally draining for you. Or, she leaned forward, a dangerous glint in her eye, we can force a swift and unconditional surrender, on our terms. Her plan was as simple as it was diabolical. She wanted me to call my parents and offer a false olive branch. A family peace summit. You're going to call your mother, she instructed. You're going to sound hesitant, maybe a little beaten down. You'll tell her you hate what this is doing to the family. You'll invite them to your house for dinner to resolve this without the lawyers. You'll invite Leo and Grace too. You have to make it sound like you're the one who is caving. I physically recoiled at the idea. Have them in my house? After they tried to steal it from me? Julia, I can't. It's a stage, Henry. And we are the directors of this little play, she said firmly. Your entire life, they viewed you as weak, emotional, and sentimental. We are going to use that prejudice as a weapon against them. They will see your invitation as a sign of weakness. They'll believe they can come into your home, your sanctuary, and bully you into submission one last time. They won't be able to resist the opportunity to gloat. But that was only the first layer of her trap. The masterstroke was yet to come. There's one more person you're going to invite, she said, pulling up a name on her computer screen that she'd found during her background research on my father. A Mr. David Abernathy. Tell me about him. I was stunned. David Abernathy? He was my dad's business partner for 20 years. They're old family friends. My dad practically worships the man. He's retired now, but he's incredibly respected in their social and business circles. A pillar of the community. Why him? Because your father's greatest weakness isn't his fear of the law? Julia explained, a slow smile spreading across her face. It's his ego, his reputation. He has built his entire identity around being a successful, upstanding patriarch. Mr. Abernathy is the living embodiment of the respect he craves. We're going to bring the high priest of his reputation into the room, and then we're going to tear down the temple of his pride right in front of him. Public shame is a far more powerful motivator for a man like your father than a prison sentence. The chilling elegance of it took my breath away. That evening, with my stomach in knots, I made the calls. My mother answered, her voice cold and suspicious. But as I stumbled through the script Julia had prepared for me, my voice laced with false regret, I could hear her tone shift. The suspicion melted away, replaced by a smug, triumphant condescension. She thought I was breaking. Fine, Henry, she finally said. We will be there. And I think it's a wonderful idea that you invited David. It's about time you had a respectable, neutral party there to make you see sense. The trap was set. The bait was taken. The stage was being prepared for the final act of their downfall. The night before the scheduled dinner, my phone rang. It was an unsaved number, but I had a sinking feeling I knew who it was. I was right. Henry, darling. The syrupy sweet voice of my Aunt Carol oozed through the speaker. Your mother told me the wonderful news. You're all having a family dinner tomorrow to sort things out. I am just so relieved you're finally coming to your senses. I remained silent, holding the phone away from my ear slightly, as if to protect myself from the radiation of her toxic positivity. Look, she continued, adopting the tone of a wise, patient elder speaking to a difficult child. I know you feel like your feelings are hurt, and that's valid. But you have to try and see the bigger picture. Your parents have always had a soft spot for Leo. He's not as strong and independent as you are. He needs more help, more of a safety net. And that big house, well, it's an awful lot for one person. They were just thinking of what was best for the family as a whole entity. The condescension was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. She was calmly and sweetly reciting the foundational lie of my entire existence. That my strength was not a virtue but a resource to be plundered for my brother's endless weakness. That my needs were secondary to the whole entity. Aunt Carol, I said, my voice dangerously flat, devoid of all emotion. They stole $201,000 from my grandmother's trust, and then committed federal tax fraud in my name for 5 years. She let out a long, theatrical, exasperated sigh. It was the sound of a woman burdened by the foolishness of others. Oh, Henry, stole is such an ugly, aggressive word. They reallocated a family resource to where it was most needed. They're your parents. They have a right. You cannot put a price tag on family. Are you really going to tear everyone apart, ruin your parents' reputation over some money? Money you probably would have just wasted on more renovations for that old house anyway. That was it. That was the line. The casual, utter dismissal of my life's work, of my passion, of the very sanctuary they were trying to take from me. It was the final confirmation that to them, I was not a person but a thing, a resource, an inconvenience, a problem to be managed. The dinner tomorrow is not a negotiation, Carol, I said, and my voice had turned to steel. It is a final presentation of facts. And let me be very clear so you can pass this along. The time for me to sit down, be quiet, and think of the bigger picture is over. It is over for good. You and the rest of the family might want to remember that. I hung up the phone before she could sputter a response. The conversation, as infuriating and insulting as it was, had been a gift. It had vaporized any lingering shred of doubt, any whisper of guilt that had been programmed into me since birth. They saw me as nothing more than a stepping stone for my brother. Tomorrow, I thought, as I looked around my beautiful, perfect house, the silent witness to my struggle and my triumph. Tomorrow they would finally learn what it felt like to be stepped on. They arrived at 7 o'clock sharp, a united front of arrogance and delusion. My father, Richard, strode in first, not like a guest, but like an inspector general, his eyes scanning my hand-restored moldings and custom-built furniture with a critical air. He was assessing the asset. My mother, Gloria, followed, giving me a tight, brittle hug that felt more like a physical assertion of her authority than an embrace. Leo shuffled in behind them, his eyes darting around the room, a sullen, put-upon expression on his face, as if this whole ordeal was a massive inconvenience for him. Grace was the last to arrive, looking pale and impossibly nervous. As she passed me in the entryway, her eyes met mine for a fleeting second. They were wide with a mixture of fear and solidarity. She gave a nearly invisible nod, a tiny gesture of confirmation that I was her only audience for. It was all I needed. She was still on the side of the truth. Finally, the guest of honor, Mr. Abernathy, arrived. He was a distinguished, kind-eyed man in his late 70s, radiating an aura of old-school integrity. He shook my hand firmly, his grip surprisingly strong. Henry, it's a pleasure to see you. My goodness, this house. It's magnificent. Your father told me you were handy, but this is true craftsmanship. A work of art. My father, standing nearby, puffed out his chest, accepting the compliment as if he had personally guided my hands. "He gets it from me," he boomed with a self-satisfied chuckle. We all sat down at the large dining table I had built with my own 2 hands from a single glorious slab of black walnut. The air was thick with unspoken tension, a suffocating blanket of resentment and greed. My mother had brought a tuna noodle casserole, a bizarrely passive-aggressive attempt to reclaim some domestic authority in my home. I ignored it and served the simple, elegant meal I had prepared. For several long minutes, the only sounds were the clinking of silverware on plates and the strained, forced pleasantries about the weather. My father, predictably, was the one to break the silence. He set down his fork with a loud, definitive clatter, wiped his mouth with his napkin, and adopted the tone he used when he was about to lecture me as a child. "Henry," he began, pointedly looking not at me, but at Mr. Abernathy, as if seeking the validation of a respected peer. "I'm glad we're all here to resolve this like a family. Your mother and I, in the interest of peace, are willing to be the bigger people here. We are willing to drop this silly, hurtful lawsuit." I raised an eyebrow, taking a slow sip of water. "Oh, yes," he continued, a smug, self-congratulatory smile playing on his lips. He was enjoying this, performing for his audience of one. "We will drop the lawsuit. In exchange, you will, of course, agree to a fair market appraisal of the house. We will then deduct the initial pittance you paid for it, and you will gift the remaining equity to your brother. It will serve as a generous down payment to help him and Grace buy a home of their own. It's a more than generous offer. It allows you to keep your little project, and more importantly, it allows you to fulfill your moral and familial duty." Leo smirked down at his plate, stabbing a piece of chicken with unnecessary force. He refused to look at me, the coward. I let my gaze travel from my father's arrogant face to my mother's, who was nodding in fervent agreement, her expression beatific. I looked at Leo, lost in his world of bottomless entitlement. The sheer, breathtaking, supernova-level arrogance of their position was almost impressive in its delusion. They had learned absolutely nothing. They felt no remorse, no guilt. They still believed, with every fiber of their beings, that they were the heroes of this story, and I the ungrateful villain. I let the silence hang in the air, stretching it until it was taut and uncomfortable. I could feel Julia's words coaching me in my ear. Let them overplay their hand. Let them put their own monstrous greed on full display for the witness. Finally, I placed my glass down gently on the walnut surface. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it landed in the center of the table like a stone. My father's face hardened, the smug mask cracking. "What did you just say?" "I said no," I repeated, my voice perfectly calm and clear. "That is not how this evening is going to conclude. Here is my offer. It is the only offer you will receive. You will have your lawyer file a motion to dismiss your lawsuit with prejudice within 24 hours. You will wire $201,000, plus 10 years of compound interest, into an account of my choosing within 30 days. And you will file amended tax returns for the 5 years you fraudulently claimed me as a dependent and pay all associated fines and back taxes directly to the IRS. You will do these things without negotiation, or my lawyer, Julia Morse, will personally walk her entire file on your activities into the offices of the IRS and the district attorney. That is the only offer on the table. Take it or leave it." My father's face went from smug to thunderous in a heartbeat. The mask didn't just crack. It shattered. He slammed his flat palm down on the table, the force of the blow making the dishes jump and a wine glass tremble. "How dare you? How dare you threaten me in my own? In front of our guest? This is my home, Dad," I said, and my voice was dangerously quiet now. "The one I paid for, the one I built, and Mr. Abernathy isn't just a guest. He's a witness to this transaction." On cue, as if summoned by the line, Julia Morse walked in from the kitchen, where she had been waiting patiently. She held a sleek, black leather portfolio. She wasn't smiling. She looked like the angel of death in a perfectly tailored blazer. "Richard, Gloria," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a shard of glass. "I'm glad you're all here. It saves us the trouble and expense of a formal deposition." My parents stared at her, their mouths literally hanging open. Leo looked like a cornered rat, his eyes darting between Julia and the front door, as if calculating his chances of escape. Julia calmly opened her portfolio on the table. "Let's start with Exhibit A," she said, sliding a certified copy of my grandmother's real will and trust documents into the center of the table. An irrevocable trust, leaving an estate of $402,000 to be split equally between your two sons. A legal document you chose to bury, Richard, in violation of your fiduciary duty as executor. She then slid a thick stack of bank statements next to it. Exhibit B, a complete record of the $402,000 being deposited into a joint bank account belonging to you, your wife, and your son, Leo. An account Henry had no knowledge of or access to. My mother started to stammer, her face pale and blotchy. We were just managing it for them. It was a family fund, for everyone's needs. A family fund that paid for a $60,000 European vacation, a failed cryptocurrency investment, and a luxury sports car that was totaled a few months later? Julia countered without missing a beat, her tone dripping with ice. "The law has a different name for that, Gloria. It's called theft. Grand larceny, to be precise." She then laid out the final, damning documents. Certified copies of their tax returns for the past 7 years, obtained legally by her office. "And this," she said, her voice dropping to a low, serious register, "is the part that should truly terrify you. This is where this messy family drama stops being a civil matter and starts being a federal crime. For 5 consecutive years, you claimed Henry as a dependent long after he was self-sufficient. You received thousands of dollars in tax credits you were not legally entitled to. You lied repeatedly on a signed federal document. You lied to the United States government." She then turned her sharp, unwavering gaze directly to Mr. Abernathy, who had been watching this all unfold with a look of dawning horror on his kind face. "David," she said, using his first name with a calculated intimacy, "you have known Richard for over 40 years. You built a business with him from the ground up. You trusted him with your livelihood. He has built his entire reputation in this community on being an honest, successful man. He has used that reputation, a reputation you helped him build, as a shield to hide these crimes. As a man of integrity, I'm sure you understand how devastating it is when that fundamental trust is broken. This was the moment. The coup twist teat low chin. The kill shot. It wasn't about the threat of prison. It was about the immediate and irreversible execution of his reputation. My father's face, which had been red with rage, slowly turned a pasty, ashen white. He looked at Mr. Abernathy, his old friend, his mentor, the pillar of his social world. He opened his mouth to speak, to offer some defense, but no words came out. He saw the look in Mr. Abernathy's eyes. It wasn't anger. It was something far worse. It was profound, quiet disgust, contempt, pity. In that single look, my father saw his entire identity. Everything he had built turned to dust. The crushing silence was finally broken by my mother. She let out a choked, theatrical sob, a sound of pure self-pity. "We don't have it," she whispered, her voice cracking as tears streamed down her face. "The money? It's gone. Leo's business venture. It failed. It's all gone." Julia's expression remained utterly unmoved. "Then you had better find it," she said, her voice as cold and hard as granite. "Sell assets. Take out loans. Liquidate your retirement funds. Figure it out. Because the alternative is a federal prison sentence for tax fraud and a state prison sentence for inheritance theft. Your choice. You have 24 hours to have your lawyer contact my office with your unconditional surrender and a payment plan. Not a second longer." She closed her portfolio with a decisive, final snap that echoed in the silent room. "Henry, I believe this dinner party is over. This is the moment that changed everything, when I finally took back control of my life. Thank you for sticking with me this far. You're amazing. Please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below. just so I know you made it here with me. It doesn't just help more people find this story. It lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey. The silence that descended upon the dining room after Julia and I walked out was, I imagine, the loudest thing my parents had ever heard. I didn't stick around to witness the full implosion. I didn't need to. I simply went into my workshop, the solid wood door closing behind me with a satisfying thud, and took the first deep, truly free breath I had taken in 34 years. The first domino fell less than an hour later. As I was wiping down my workbench, my phone lit up with a text message. It was from Grace. I'm so sorry, Henry, for everything, for not speaking up sooner. I just left. I told Leo we're over. I can't marry into a family that operates on lies and theft. I truly wish you all the best. You deserve it. A wave of relief washed over me, mixed with a pang of sadness for her. Grace was a good person who had gotten entangled in a toxic web not of her making. I was glad she had found the strength to cut herself free. The next, more significant domino fell the following morning. At precisely 10:14 a.m., Julia called me. Her voice was crisp and professional. It's done, she said. Their lawyer just sent over the signed compliance agreement. They're agreeing to every single one of our demands. The lawsuit against you is being officially withdrawn with prejudice as we speak. The first payment installment is being arranged. The final, largest dominoes took a few weeks to topple, but when they did, they brought the whole rotten structure down. The first sign was the bright red for sale sign that appeared on the lawn of my childhood home. It was a surreal sight. They had to sell the house, their primary asset, to pay back the inheritance they had stolen and the mountain of penalties and back taxes they owed to the IRS. The house I had grown up in, the one filled with so many ghosts of slights and quiet injustices, was being sacrificed to pay for their crimes against me. There was a grim, undeniable poetry in that. The news of their financial ruin and the reasons behind it ripped through their social circle. Mr. Abernathy, a man known for his discretion, was apparently not discreet when it came to matters of profound moral failing. He told a few key people, framing it as a deep personal disappointment, and the story spread like wildfire. My father, the man who lived and breathed for his reputation as a shrewd and honorable patriarch, became a pariah overnight. The successful family man was exposed as a common thief who had stolen from his own son. Leo, without Grace's stabilizing influence and without his parents' endless river of unearned money, was completely adrift. He had to move back in with my parents into a small, generic apartment they were renting on the other side of town. The golden child had lost his shine, his future, once a gilded path paved by my unwilling sacrifice, was now a blank, terrifying slate of his own making. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. Watching their empire of lies and entitlement burn to the ground didn't bring me the rush of triumphant joy I might have expected. It just felt quiet. It felt like a great, heavy weight had been lifted from my shoulders. It was balance being restored to the universe. It was the closing of a painful, suffocating chapter, and the quiet turning of a fresh, clean page. About a month after the sale of their house closed, they showed up at my front door unannounced. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was sketching a design for a new project when I saw them through the window, standing on my porch, looking smaller and more ordinary than I had ever seen them. My father's usual arrogant, chest-out posture was gone, replaced by a defeated slump in his shoulders. My mother's face was puffy and pale, her eyes red-rimmed. I took a deep breath, walked to the door, and opened it. I didn't invite them in. I stood in the doorway, a human barrier to the sanctuary they had tried to violate and now sought comfort in. Henry, my mother began, her voice trembling with a mixture of tears and frustration. Can we please just talk? I think we've done enough talking, I said, my voice even in calm. There was no anger left, just a vast, quiet emptiness where my filial obligation used to be. My father looked up at me, his eyes searching my face, and for a fleeting second, I thought I might see a flicker of remorse, a hint of apology. Instead, I was met with the same old toxic bitterness. Are you happy now? He asked, his voice thick with a resentment that was almost palpable. "You've ruined us. You've destroyed your own family. I just hope it was worth it to you." And there it was, the final, irrefutable proof. After everything, the theft, the lies, the public humiliation, they still didn't get it. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were only sorry that they got caught, and that there were consequences. In the twisted narrative playing out in their minds, they were still the victims, and I was the cruel, ungrateful villain who had brought about their downfall. In that clarifying moment, I realized something profound. I had spent my entire life on a fool's errand, craving their approval, their love, their simple acknowledgement. And I was never, ever going to get it. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because they were fundamentally incapable of giving it. Their love was a conditional, transactional thing, a currency they used to control and manipulate. And I had finally refused to pay their price. A strange and wonderful sense of peace washed over me. I wasn't angry anymore. I just felt nothing. The powerful, invisible emotional chains they'd had wrapped around me for over 30 years finally rusted through and turned to dust. "I didn't ruin this family," I said, my voice clear and steady, without a trace of the anger or hurt they expected. "You did. You made your choices over and over again for decades. These are simply the consequences. The money is being repaid, the legal matters are settled. We have nothing left to talk about." My mother started to cry again, a desperate, wailing sound. "But we're your parents. We're your family." "Being a parent is a verb," I replied, the words coming to me with an absolute, unshakable clarity. "It's something you do, day in and day out. It's not a title you get to hold over someone's head forever, regardless of your actions. And it's a job you failed at. Goodbye." I closed the door gently, but firmly, in their shocked faces. I leaned against the solid wood, listening to them linger on the porch for a moment, whispering in angry, confused tones, before their footsteps finally faded down the walkway. I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel anger. I felt relief. I had set my final boundary. The ghost had finally left their house, and he was never, ever going back. The year that followed was one of quiet, deliberate reconstruction. Not of a house this time, but of a life. With the stolen inheritance being repaid in steady, court-ordered installments. A heavy financial burden I hadn't even fully acknowledged was lifted. I paid off the last of the high-interest loans I had taken out during the toughest parts of the renovation. I invested in a new, state-of-the-art table saw for my workshop, a luxury I'd never dreamed of affording. My business, free from the constant strain of financial insecurity, began to flourish. The story of my house, and the meticulous craftsmanship that went into it, had spread through the local community, and I was getting commissions for custom furniture that challenged and excited me. But the most significant change was internal. The profound silence from my parents and brother was a gift I hadn't known I needed. It was a vast, quiet space where I could finally hear my own thoughts, my own desires, without their constant, critical narration. The gaping wound they had left in the center of my life, the one I had tried to patch over for years, finally began to heal from the inside out. And in its place, something new and unexpected began to grow. My public declaration of war in the family group chat had an unintended, positive side effect. A few of the relatives who had been quickest to condemn me, like my Aunt Carol and Uncle Joe, remained silent, estranged by their own shame and misplaced loyalty. But others reached out, tentatively at first, then with more confidence. An uncle my father had a falling out with over a business deal years ago. A cousin my mother had always dismissed as not ambitious enough, because she chose to be a potter. These were the other family members who had been pushed to the margins of my parents' rigid, judgmental family narrative. They didn't call to gossip or to take sides. They called to connect. My uncle called and told me, "Your dad did the same thing to me on a smaller scale 20 years ago. I'm proud of you for standing up to him." My cousin invited me to her pottery studio, and we spent an afternoon talking about the joy of creating things with our hands. We discovered we had more in common than we ever knew. Turned out, I wasn't the only ghost in the family archives. There was a whole contingent of us. That next Thanksgiving, My house was filled to the brim with people. But it wasn't my parents or Leo casting their long shadows over the meal. It was my newfound uncle and his wife. It was my Potter cousin and her family. It was Grace, who had become a dear and trusted friend. It was Marco and Julia, my saviors, and their spouses. We crowded around the big walnut table, the very same table that had served as the stage for my judgment day. But now, instead of being thick with tension and bitterness, the air was filled with easy laughter, genuine warmth, and the happy chaos of a real family gathering. We weren't a family bound by the chains of obligation or a shared last name, but by the simple, powerful tenets of mutual respect and genuine affection. I looked around at the smiling faces, the easy conversations, and I realized a profound truth. I hadn't destroyed my family. I had escaped a toxic cult and, in doing so, had finally found my real tribe. My house was no longer a fortress I had to defend. It was a home, finally filled with the unconditional love it was always meant to hold. Just when I thought my story had reached its peaceful, satisfying conclusion, a final chapter one never knew was written revealed itself. I received a call from an elderly gentleman named Caleb Morrison, a lawyer from a quiet town 3 hours away. He introduced himself as the personal attorney and longtime friend of my late grandmother, Martha. "I've been following the public records of the legal case between you and your parents, son," he said, his voice kind and gravelly with age. "I had a feeling something like this might happen one day. Your grandmother, she would have been proud, fiercely proud." He explained that my grandmother had left something for me with him personally, something entirely separate from the official will and the trust. She had given him explicit instructions that it was only to be given to me after a significant period of time had passed, or in the event of what she called a fundamental family crisis. He chuckled softly. "I think a lawsuit between a son and his parents qualifies as fundamental." I drove to his office the very next day, my mind buzzing with a mixture of curiosity and a deep, aching nostalgia for the grandmother I had so misunderstood. Caleb's office was like stepping back in time, filled with law books and the smell of old paper. He was a kind, grandfatherly man who looked at me with my grandmother's eyes. He handed me a heavy, locked wooden box, beautifully crafted from cherry wood. "She called this your just-in-case box," he said with a warm smile. "The key is for you alone. She made me promise." He handed me a small, ornate brass key. I took the box out to my car, my hands trembling slightly. I sat in the driver's seat, the engine off, and turned the key in the lock. The lid opened with a soft click. Inside, there were two things. The first was a faded blue passbook for a bank account I never knew existed. The last entry showed a balance of $50,000. The second was a thick, leather-bound journal. My grandmother's diary. My heart pounded in my chest. I opened the journal. Her familiar, elegant handwriting filled the pages, a script I hadn't seen in years. I flipped to one of the last entries, dated just a few months before she passed away. "I have finalized the trust," she wrote. "Equal shares for both my boys. It is the only fair and right way. But a shadow lingers in my heart. I worry about my son, Richard. I love him dearly, but I am not blind to his flaws. He sees Leo's profound weakness and calls it artistic potential. He sees Henry's quiet strength and calls it a resource to be taken for granted. He will be the executor, and I have a cold, sinking fear that he will try to cheat Henry out of what is rightfully his. He will justify it, as he always does, with that poisonous phrase, doing what's best for the family. This separate account, this journal, this is my insurance policy for my dear Henry. It is my final act of love. It is not a fortune, but it is a secret between him and me. If the worst happens, if his own father betrays him, I want him to have this. A small fund to start a life entirely free from them without obligation. But more than the money, I want him to have these words. I want him to know, across the years, that his grandmother saw him. I always saw him. His hands are smart, his heart is true. He will build a beautiful life, and he deserves every plank, every nail, every dollar he earns to build it. Tears streamed down my face as I read the words, blurring the ink on the page. It was a voice from the grave, A final, fierce act of love and protection. The last, deepest wound I carried. The secret, shameful belief that my grandmother, my only ally, had abandoned me in the end, was finally, completely healed. She hadn't betrayed me. She had foreseen the betrayal and had done the only thing she could to reach across time and tell me I was not alone. The $50,000 was a wonderful, practical gift. But her words were the true inheritance. They were the validation, the unconditional love I had spent a lifetime searching for in all the wrong places. I used the money to pay off the last of my business debts and to build a beautiful, sun-drenched greenhouse in my backyard. A place of life, growth, and quiet contemplation. It was a tribute to her, the woman who had planted the seeds of strength in me so long ago. It's been 2 years now since that fateful dinner. 2 years since the foundations of my old life were demolished to make way for the new. I sometimes get third-hand updates from the family grapevine. My parents live a quiet, much smaller life now in their rented apartment. My father's pride, his most prized and polished possession, is gone, shattered beyond repair. They are shadows of the powerful, intimidating figures who once dominated my world. Leo is working a dead-end sales job, the first real, unsubsidized employment of his life. We don't speak. We have nothing left to say to each other. I harbor no ill will towards them. No anger, no hatred, not anymore. To feel those things would be to keep them tethered to me. Instead, I simply don't think of them much at all. They exist in a different universe, a different story, one I am no longer a character in. My story is here. It's in the smell of fresh-cut cedar in my workshop on a crisp morning. It's in the taste of the sun-warmed tomatoes I grow in the greenhouse my grandmother's love built. It's in the sound of genuine, easy laughter filling my home during a gathering of my chosen family. It's in the quiet, solid pride I feel when I run my hand over the smooth surface of a finished piece of furniture, knowing that I made it with my own 2 smart hands. For a long time, I thought revenge was about a grand, satisfying victory. I thought it was about seeing those who wronged you get what they deserve. I thought it was about winning, but I was wrong. The best revenge isn't about living well to spite them. It's about living honestly. It's about building a life so full of truth, purpose, and integrity that their world of lies and manipulation can't even touch it. It's about having nothing left to hide and, finally, nothing left to fear. My name is Henry Miller. I'm 36 years old, and I am finally, completely, free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever had to fight for something that was rightfully yours, against people you were supposed to be able to trust? I'd be honored if you'd share your thoughts in the comments below. And please, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next. Your support truly means the world to me.